little, we are asked what we want to be when we grow up. We say things like, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a doctor, or even, I want to be an astronaut. But at some point, we are told that we need to choose what we want to do based on what will make us the happiest. We are told by adults that doing something which doesn't make us happy isn't worth doing. Throughout our life, this importance of happiness is emphasized again and again. Today, in this talk, I will be taking you on the journey of learning what we need to find happiness in our lives. This always sounds like such a big thing, but what if it's actually not all that difficult? We just need to ensure that we are looking at the key components. So where do we start? Let's start with the statement, happiness is not a destination, but a way of life. Maybe you've even heard this before, but I want to ask you if you agree with it. You might be thinking, okay, I don't think that happiness is a destination, so sure, I agree with it. I would say, fine, that's a fair point. But before just simply agreeing with it and quickly moving on, we first need to unpack what this journey actually is and what true happiness really means. As with almost everything in life, this journey consists of much more than just happiness. But let's first look at what happiness really means. What makes you happy? You might say your job, the people you work with, maybe where you live. Hopefully, your answer includes you're spending time with your close family and friends. What got you to what you said makes you happy? Is it your own dedication, determination, and hard work? Maybe it's money. Hopefully, it's also support from close family members and friends. I'd like you to remember your answers, as we'll need them again later. One of the first big moments in our lives is when we make our first friend. You probably even remember who your first best friend was. Most of the time, these friendships don't last super long, or at least the closeness of them doesn't. But what does last is a feeling of connection, which we long to share with another friend from that point forward. Friendship plays a huge role in our lives. Friendships are the first relationships we have outside of our family, and often it's even one of the first things our parents ask us about when we get home on the first day of school. Did you make any new friends? When my family and I moved from the US to Germany when I was 9 years old, one of the big things for my siblings and I was to make new friends. Going to a European school, the new friends that I made came from all sorts of places in the world, meaning that we had something to relate to. This made the transition of living in a new country a lot easier, as I now had friends who knew exactly what I was going through. Our parents understand the importance that relationships or friendships have on us and in turn on our happiness. So when they ask us about our friends, they're also instilling that value into us. And we quickly learn that cultivating relationships with others is an important life skill which impacts our happiness. The impact that relationships have specifically on our long-term happiness is something which the Harvard study of adult development has proven. The Harvard study of adult development was started in 1938. Researchers started with a group of 724 boys and men. The first group was a group of men who started the study as sophomores at Harvard. They graduated during World War II, and most went on to serve in the war. While the second group was a group of boys from Boston's poorest neighborhoods. This study followed these men throughout their whole lives. They went on to do all sorts of things. Some became factory workers, others doctors, one even became president of the United States, just to name a few. But what these researchers found was that the men who had more social connections were happier, healthier, and often even lived longer. But when it came to relationships, they found that it wasn't the number of relationships that mattered the most, but it was the quality that mattered more. And finally, the researchers also found that it wasn't even the health factors that predicted how happy the men would be later on in life, but it was actually how satisfied they were in their relationships. So now I've essentially told you that you need strong and healthy relationships to somehow be happy. But you might still have a question going off in your mind, and it might be, how do I cultivate these strong and healthy relationships? Well, I've come up with a simple acronym to help you remember what I believe are the most important aspects of forming these relationships. The acronym is the word time. T stands for time. At the most basic level, in order to build any relationship with any person, we need time. Studies have shown that we need about 60 hours of conversation time to build a deep bond. Obviously, that's a lot of time. We don't have that amount of time to do this with too many people, meaning we generally only have a few really close relationships. This being said, we need to prioritize our time in a way in which we have time for the relationships we care about the most. I stands for invest. After we have spent some time with someone, meaning we know them on a basic level, and want to drive our bond further, we now need to invest trust and vulnerability. In order to be vulnerable with someone, we need to know that we can trust them. Through this trust and vulnerability, we can now have lots of meaningful conversations. M stands for meaningful conversations. It's through these that we can truly see who the other person is on the inside. And a lot of the time, we actually learn a whole lot about ourselves as well. Finally, E stands for energy. Once we have completed the first 3 steps, we have essentially completed the 4th, because the first 3 include putting in a lot of energy. But what I believe is super important and also interesting is that we can actually gain energy from these relationships, especially from the meaningful conversations. Relationships can recharge us. They can keep us going, and most importantly, they can even give us something to look forward to. I have found that through my long-distance relationships with both my best friend and my godmother, that I can be in constant communication with them, and I don't get tired of hearing from them. But when life gets busy and we don't have as much time, I can also go a while without hearing from them. But once we do speak or even see each other in person again, it feels as though no time has passed, like we can pick back up right where we left off. You might be asking yourself, okay, why? Well, I believe it's because we've followed these steps. We've spent so much time with each other, we've invested our trust and vulnerability, and have been able to have so many meaningful conversations, through which we really learned who the other person is on the inside, as well as learned so much about ourselves. This means that we have a stable foundation of our relationship, which we can easily fall back onto, even though we don't get to see each other in person too often. Earlier, I asked you what makes you happy. Now I want to ask what brings you joy. And I'll give you a second to think about it because it's not always too easy to identify. I'd like you to raise your hand if you had the same answer to both questions. What makes you happy and what brings you joy? Raise your hand if you had different answers. For everyone who had the same answer to both questions, what makes you happy and what brings you joy, this is probably because we tend to use the terms joy and happiness interchangeably. What I realized while writing this talk was that I couldn't even identify when I felt joy. I didn't know what the sources of my joy were. But at some point, I wrote a sentence which included the word enjoy. And it was at that moment, staring at that word, that I realized that the word enjoy includes the word joy. If you take off the en, it just says joy. So then I thought about, okay, what do I enjoy doing? I enjoy spending time with the people close to me, my family and my friends. I enjoy reading. I enjoy playing with my dog. And I enjoy learning things about human spaceflight. These are all sources of my joy. So instead of asking yourself, what brings me joy, you can ask yourself what you enjoy doing, and hopefully be able to pinpoint when you feel joy. When trying to find happiness, we tend to forget about our joy, or we simply think that joy and happiness are the same thing. I believe it's super important that we differentiate between the two. that they are not the same thing, and that joy, although it is sometimes harder to identify, is a huge factor of our happiness. So what's the difference? Well, if you do a quick Google search, difference between happiness and joy, you will find that happiness tends to rely on the circumstances, while joy is a longer-lasting feeling of contentment. Let's think of it this way. Let's compare joy to breathing. We experience it on a daily basis. But when do you realize that you are breathing? Only when you stop to think about it. Isn't it the same thing with joy? We only realize what brings us joy when we stop to think about it, when we stop to ask ourselves what we enjoy doing. But just like we need to breathe to do essentially everything else in our life, we need joy to build relationships, to increase our moments of happiness, and to cope better during our moments of sorrow. Happiness, unlike joy, relies on our circumstances. What do you do when you get some kind of really exciting news? We often can't keep it to ourselves, right? We have to go and tell someone. And it's within those first few seconds of that conversation that we say, "I'm so happy." Guess what just happened? It's that phrase, "I'm so happy," which is sparked by a change in circumstances. Examples of this might be if you get into your dream university, or maybe you get the job that you've been waiting really long for, just to name a couple. How can we visualize joy and happiness? Here we have a line. I'd like you to think of this line as the journey of your life. This line represents joy, assuming that we experience joy on a daily basis, although not necessarily constantly. We can add some dots above the line which represent happy moments, and some dots below, which represent the rough moments in life. But how do we connect all of these elements together? How can we connect our joy, our happy moments, and our rough moments? Well, earlier we talked about how relationships are the main factor of determining our long-term happiness. What if this is what connects everything? Well, what do you do when you get some super exciting news? You go and tell someone, and you say, "I'm so happy this just happened." What do you do when you get some kind of bad news? We often go and tell someone, right? And hopefully seek support from maybe our close family members or friends. We also know that relationships can be a source of our joy. Putting all of this together, we can now connect our joy, our happy moments, and our rough moments through building strong and healthy relationships. Our relationships have a direct impact on our happiness. We need someone there to celebrate the highs, or to cheer us on at the rough points. We need someone there when we get too self-centered to remind us that we are not better than anyone else. Or when we have given up on our hopes and our dreams, we need someone there to remind us that no one is better than us, that we should still continue to chase them. Now we can truly see how important joy is in our relationships, how we actually need joy to be happy, and that having strong and healthy relationships can increase our moments of happiness and help us cope better during our moments of sorrow. Finally, we can readjust the statement of happiness is not a destination to instead happiness is not a destination, but a way of life when following our journey of joy. Once we focus on our joy, we can focus on our relationships. Strong and healthy relationships are built on top of the basis of joy, but will eventually also be a source of it. And only after taking into account that joy is both the basis of our happiness and our relationships can we truly see the positive effects of it on our life. Thank you.